Welcome aboard the Intrepid, the legendary aircraft carrier commissioned back in 1943. Did you know that thousands of Asian Americans served during World War II? Some right here on the Intrepid. We'll have their story coming up, plus changemakers who are making their mark in history. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo, and you're watching Asian American Life. Men of Valor, my special report on the Chinese American World War II veterans. Words of wisdom, an exclusive interview with America's first Asian American rabbi. From pinup model to female empowerment, author Kaila Yu's memoir, Fetishized. Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund fights for civil and immigrant rights. Plus the importance of belonging and the Localized History Project. This and more on Asian American Life. Did you know that 1 out of 4 Chinese Americans served during World War II? This even as they face racism and discrimination because of the Chinese Exclusion Act. Well, now these veterans are being remembered in one of the biggest parades in the country and city. For Tommie Louie, last November's Veterans Day Parade was especially significant.
I'm so proud to represent my grandfather. I'm so proud of all the veterans that served us, and if I can do anything to honor them, I'm very happy to.
This was the first time in the parade's 106-year history that Chinese American veterans who served during World War II were being remembered. All thanks to this woman, Shirley Ng, who co-founded Legacy of Honor and Courage.
It's just been incredible that we have over 40 people that have registered to march and representing 26 Chinese American World War II veterans today.
Families traveled from as far as Hawaii, California, Utah, Massachusetts, and Belgium. They, along with a slew of volunteers, carried poster-sized photos of those who served.
They were filled with joy because they were very proud. They were very proud of their family service, and they just wanted that recognition. They wanted to share their story. They wanted to show their faces.
I met with Ng recently at the American Legion Kim Lau Post in Chinatown. Her organization is currently making preparations for the 2026 parade, one they will hope will bring in even more families.
It was important for me because when I went to the New York City Veterans Day Parade in 2023, 2024, I saw other groups marching and holding photos of veterans that served in World War II. And I noticed that there weren't any that looked like me, and none that were of Chinese descent.
20,000 Chinese Americans served during World War II, which at the time was 20% of the total Chinese American population in the country. That's 1 out of 4 people. And more than half, 13,000, enlisted in an era when the Chinese Exclusion Act barred them the right to obtain U.S. citizenship.
You have Chinese Americans serving a country, defending the freedom of this nation, that they weren't even receiving these civil rights. They weren't able to vote, they weren't able to be naturalized, but yet they served.
There was Sam Louie, who served in the U.S. Army.
My grandfather was based out of Coney Island, and Coney Island, Brooklyn. A real Brooklyn boy, and you know, he was gonna show everybody what Brooklyn could do for the U.S. Army.
There was Dai Lin, who flew with the Flying Tigers in the U.S. Air Corps 14th Service Group, and Private Wing Oh Ham, who died in the Battle of Cisterna after an intense fight against German forces. Ham was finally laid to rest in 2023 with full military honors in Brooklyn after being honored with the Purple Heart and Bronze Star. Chinese American women also served, including Ruby Kim Tape, who enlisted in 1944. Her niece, Elisa Kim, proudly held her aunt's photo. Then there's Lieutenant B.R. Kim Lau from New York's Chinatown, who served as a U.S. Army Air Force bomber pilot. He died in action when Japanese forces shot down his plane, killing the entire crew. In 1944, the American Legion Post Lieutenant B.R. Kim Lau was established in his honor. In 1962, the post erected the Kim Lau War Memorial in Chatham Square to honor all Chinese Americans who served in the war. Then, in 2021, some 60 years later, During the height of anti-Asian hate, the city finally designated the memorial as an official city landmark, the first landmark related to Chinese American history.
They served in every theater of war, in every branch of the services. And for most of them, it was their first opportunity to work and live and fight side by side with other Americans.
In addition, in 2018, after more than 75 years, the veterans also received the nation's highest civilian honor, the Congressional Gold Medal, joining other World War II vets like the Japanese American Nisei soldiers and the Filipino and Filipino Americans who received the same honor earlier. The pandemic delayed the official ceremony, but later several of the surviving veterans, some in wheelchairs, accepted the medal in ceremonies across the country. Today, with only a few survivors left, Ng wants to make sure no one forgets the sacrifices these men and women made for their country, a legacy that will continue to march on. For Asian American Life, I'm Ernabelle DeMillo.
I'm Kyung Yoon. May is Asian American and Jewish American Heritage Month, and I had the privilege to get up close and personal with Angela Buchdahl, the senior rabbi at Central Synagogue here in New York City, and the first Asian American rabbi in North America. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's kind of beautiful. This is sort of this is a scroll that survived the Holocaust.
It's impossible not to feel a kind of ancient wonder when Rabbi Angela Buchdahl opens the Holy Ark at Central Synagogue, one of the oldest, largest, and most influential Jewish congregations in New York City and in the country.
It's my 25th year in the rabbinate, but my 20th year here at Central Synagogue, which is hard to believe.
Buchdahl first arrived as the congregation's senior cantor in 2006. 8 years later, she faced a crossroads: remain in a role she loved or step into a position no woman had ever held at Central Synagogue.
There had not at that point been a female senior rabbi of this congregation at that time. It's 175 years. And there were very few women leading congregations that were large congregations. And so it felt like there was something impossible about this job as a woman with young kids. But part of it was reimagining what the position could be.
Buchdahl has spent her career reimagining and redefining what Jewish leadership can look like, not only as a woman, but as a Korean American Jew. Stepping into the senior rabbi role meant challenging long-held assumptions about who belongs on the pulpit and expanding the possibilities of what a Jewish leader can be.
I grew up at a time when I never saw myself reflected in the Jewish community at all as a Korean American. And I didn't see myself in a single Jewish book. I certainly didn't see myself represented on the pulpit in any leadership positions, but it was just absent from Jewish spaces. And it's not that there were absolutely no Asian Jews, but they didn't feel comfortable in traditional Jewish synagogues in the time that I was growing up. So they essentially were invisible.
Rabbi Buchdahl was born in Seoul in 1972 to a Korean Buddhist mother and a Jewish American father. When she was 5, the family moved to Tacoma, Washington, where she and her sister grew up at Temple Bethel, the synagogue 4 generations of her father's family had called home.
All of us have experiences of insider and outsider, and I do too as well. Now in some ways you could say I'm a rabbi of a large synagogue, I'm an ultimate insider, but I've never lost the heart of a stranger. I've never lost that feeling of knowing what it's like to not really fit in.
That lifelong awareness of what it feels like to stand on the outside looking in has shaped her leadership and her empathy. And it's why her New York Times best-selling book, published last fall, is titled Heart of a Stranger. It's also a perspective that has transformed Central Synagogue. Under her leadership, the congregation has grown significantly, drawing hundreds into the sanctuary each week for Shabbat services and hundreds of thousands more who join through the live stream.
It always feels very special for me when I have an opportunity to kind of reflect also on my Korean side.
Rabbi Buchdahl also makes time for Asian American audiences. At a recent Korea Society event, she spoke frankly about her Korean identity and how it has shaped her journey, and stayed to sign books for attendees eager to meet her. Her special gift is to connect Korean and Jewish culture through the universal language of music. During a visit to Seoul 2 years ago, she collaborated with local musicians on a mashup of Arirang and Jerusalem of Gold, the unofficial anthems of Korea and Israel. With the heart of a stranger, Rabbi Buchdahl leads with empathy and opens doors between worlds. And through her music, her most personal form of prayer, she brings Jewish and Korean cultures into harmony. A leader who builds bridges by being one. Kyung-Yoon, Asian American Life.
For more than 50 years, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, ALDEF, has been advocating for Asian American communities often left out of the legal system. I caught up with their new executive director, Bethany Lee.
I became the ED about a year and a half ago. And this was a big change for the organization because our ED had been here for 50 years beforehand and had been the founding ED.
Bethany Lee is the new executive director of the Asian American Legal Defense Fund, known by their acronym ALDEF, founded in 1974 by a group of young lawyers inspired by the civil rights and anti-war movements. Former executive director Margaret Fung led the organization for more than 50 years.
There was a workshop in New York City in 1974 about legal rights of Asian Americans. The people who attended were interested and concerned about how Asian Americans were not being represented in the legal system.
ALDEF was the first nonprofit organization to address civil rights issues affecting Asian Americans, from police brutality to anti-Muslim and anti-Asian hate. And they've litigated and won millions of dollars in back wages and overtime pay for Asian immigrants working in the restaurant, hotel, and garment industries.
It sends a clear message that Chinese Americans will stand up for their rights and they won't tolerate labor law violations.
Today, a new generation of leadership is carrying ALDEF's mission forward, guided by both history and lived experience. For Bethany Lee, the work is deeply personal.
I grew up with a large family, and my grandparents, my parents, uncles and aunts all around. A lot of the inspiration that I take from the work that I do comes from, I think, the experiences that I know that my family had, that my grandparents and parents had in immigrating to the United States. My grandparents were restaurant workers, restaurant owners, garment factory workers, dry cleaners. So my family experience really informs the work that I do.
Lee first joined ALDEF as a young attorney, representing tenants and business owners facing displacement.
I was very intentional in going to law school to do work that is grounded in community and really help to build community power.
Today, ALDEF's work is expanding beyond New York, opening offices in Minnesota, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Texas. The Asian American population has grown tenfold in the U.S. since ALDEF opened its doors, and despite decades of advocacy, many Asian immigrants still struggle to access legal services. Those barriers are highlighted in ALDEF's latest report, Living at the Margins.
There's language barriers, cultural barriers, all of these different challenges that sometimes are so invisible you don't even think about it.
And the legal battles for workers and immigrants have become more complex under the Trump regime, with mass deportations and executive orders challenging birthright citizenship.
It's very clear that the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship for anyone who is born in the United States.
The 14th Amendment was further cemented more than a century ago in the landmark Supreme Court case United States versus Wong Kim Ark.
He was born in the United States and had left to go back to China, and as he was coming back, was stopped and told that he couldn't re-enter.
With support from the Chinese American community, Wong Kim Ark brought his case all the way to the Supreme Court. On March 28, 1898, in a 6-2 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Wong Kim Ark, reaffirming that any child born on U.S. soil is automatically a U.S. citizen.
Wong Kim Ark was obviously a Chinese plaintiff, but the lawyers were all white attorneys. You fast forward to now and you see ACLU attorney Cecilia Wong at the Supreme Court arguing this case that originated from really Asian American history, right? Because Asian American history is immigration history. And you see how our community has progressed and evolved in our ability to defend ourselves.
So we've just wrapped arguments in the birthright citizenship case. I'm Cecilia Wong, legal director of the ACLU.
There were over 70 community organizations and racial justice centers that were signed on, and our community has mobilized both in front of the Supreme Court. And I think the outpouring of opposition that you're seeing is actually this country saying that we do belong.
In a time of challenges, ALDEF sees its role clearly.
I think our role in this current regime is to defend our community. It's what we've done for the past 50 plus years, and it's what we'll continue to do for the next 50 years.
For Asian American Life, I'm Rainer Ramirez.
In her critically acclaimed and brutally honest memoir, Fetishized, Kaila Yu reflects on her life as an entertainer through the lens of the Asian fetish. It's been a crazy ride for musician, model, actress, and now author Kaila Yu.
The 2000s was a time kind of post-feminism when a lot of women were leaning into their sexuality, and it was kind of like, oh, sexy is empowering. We enjoy sex and we are in control of it. And it was like unknowingly kind of anti-feminist. Now that we're looking back, we're like, oh, we treated women horribly during that time, but nobody was paying attention, that we were just kind of having fun.
Fun that came at a cost for the former pinup model who says she unintentionally became an object of Asian fetish, which she candidly details in her new raw memoir, Fetishized, a reckoning with yellow fever, feminism, and beauty.
I was so nerdy and invisible growing up. I was like, I do not want any part of this model minority. So I want to be the opposite, rebellious. And that's kind of where the Asian baby girl aesthetic came out of. These were the rebellious Asian girls who went to raves and they smoke and they party. And they kind of weren't trying to be fetishy, but then they were creating all this material for fetishes that didn't exist before, because this was also the dawn of the internet.
It wasn't until years later, after the Atlanta spa shootings, that Yu came to the realization that she had been complicit in fueling the Asian fetish, a revelation that became the inspiration for her memoir.
I think when every Asian woman heard the details, they knew it was sexually motivated. And my friends and I did, and the media's never recognized it as such. And the details that came out later confirmed that it was sexually motivated. And that caused me to reflect back on my early years, my 20s, which I never reflected back on. I just looked back on that time as like, oh, that fun, crazy time. And I didn't think about it a lot. But then I thought like, oh, how did we get to this place of violence? And then I started digging into it, and there's a lot of underreported violence against Asian women. And that kind of inspired me to write an article for Newsweek about like how I was complicit in the Asian fetish, how I actually leaned into it in my youth. And that ultimately inspired the book.
The candid author speaks openly about a number of sensitive topics in her book, including surgery she had trying to conform to a Caucasian standard of beauty and traumatic abuse she suffered at the beginning of her career.
I was assaulted in college, and there was a video that existed online for years, and people spoke about it, and people had many thoughts about it. And it was therapeutic, and it was my first time addressing it, because in 20 years I had never said anything publicly. So in that way, it was therapeutic, and I had spoken about it 100 times with therapy. Like, I've done so much work on that situation that I do feel at peace with it, if that makes sense. But also, I think it's so important for me to keep talking about it, because I did not know it was assault for 20 years. It was only when I shared it with a therapist and other women in recovery, they were like, that is assault.
12 years sober now, Yu says she abused drugs to numb the pain of her trauma.
I did not want to be in my head and my body.
Beyond objectification, the former sex symbol says the danger of the Asian fetish is that it often goes hand in hand with violence.
Not everybody knows that it basically originated in violence. Like, a lot of the times when Western men first encountered Asian women is usually in terms of war and military conquest and occupation. So, like, as far back as the Philippine-American War, and then you had World War II, Vietnam War, all these wars. And yes, there were prostitutes set up as rest and recreation for these soldiers, but like, some of the prostitutes have described the sex that they had to endure basically as ghastly and animalistic. So it started from like this violent conquest.
Now at a very peaceful place in her life, Yu says writing her memoir was tremendously therapeutic and hopes it can be for those reading it as well.
I guess the worst thing that happened to me is now a way where I can speak about it, because not everybody's comfortable speaking about it, and that can help people.
The message Yu is most interested in passing on to young Asian women is all about self-love.
I wish that I knew I was loved. I think that would have affected every decision from that point on. If Asian women can think about acting from a place of like self-love and self-validation, like do what makes me happy, then I think all the decisions from there are good when you're satisfying yourself and not the male gaze or whatever else is out there.
For Asian American Life, I'm Susan Jun.
Imagine students in the role of teachers, collecting research from archives and oral histories from family, friends, and neighbors to tell the stories of how AAPI communities took root in all corners of New York City. That's what the Localized History Project, housed at the Asian American Asian Research Institute at CUNY, is all about.
Where do we see China's Latino culture locally, and how can we sort of understand how it reflects broader global structures?
High school senior Clarissa Kunizaki is a youth director of the Localized History Project. She's one of 4 presenters at this event, AAPI New York, Stories from the Bronx, at Hostos Community College. Using slides, Kunizaki presents her research on Chinese Latino culture, locally and globally, and it's personal.
My family is Chinese Ecuadorian. I've really been able to take pride in it, even though our history is not represented within classrooms.
She shares her family's journey to America by way of Ecuador a century ago. It began with her great-great-grandfather, Raphael Chan, who left Canton, China, and ended up in Guayaquil near the Galapagos Islands in the early 1900s.
he opened Salon Chan Chan, a restaurant fusing Chinese and Ecuadorian cuisine. Kunizaki then connects her family's story to some of New York City's Chino-Latino restaurants today as living, localized history stemming from national and global events, the Chinese Exclusion Act in America, as well as the transmigration of mostly Chinese and Indian laborers to plantations and developments in the Caribbean and South America.
When we think of like the historical use of textbooks and the way in which they kind of present dominant narratives, Localized History Project is really focused on ensuring that our history isn't presented in like a literal 2D format, but rather like 3D and something that's interactive.
I think that they are given a sense by the education system that their life experience, what they're bringing from outside of school, their family histories are not relevant or important. And therefore, like, that actually harms them when they are trying to learn, because you learn through making connections.
Undoing that harm was Shreya Sundaram's goal when she created the Localized History Project. A former high school teacher in Manhattan, she noticed for years how many students disagreed with the point of view contained in the world history lessons that were required by the state's curriculum.
While the global north or Europe and the United States were often portrayed in ways where they had mass impact on global movements like the Enlightenment, whenever the global south was mentioned, it was often through specific token figures like Mao or Gandhi. And you really didn't learn social movement history or the ways in which communities worked together collaboratively.
She says what teachers teach in school is determined by the Regents exams. Students have had to pass several of them to get their diploma since the mid-1800s. According to the National Center for Fair and Open Testing, New York is one of only 6 states that still require exit exams for high school graduation.
They really determine both the global history curriculum and the U.S. history curriculum that is taught in schools. And that really limits then what can actually happen within a classroom.
It was also the waning years of the pandemic. Because of anti-Asian bias attacks across the country, Sundaram created an Asian American culture club for high school students. This was a chance to reimagine what a history lesson could really look like.
We met once a month on Zoom. We had conversations about Asian American identity. I remember we talked about the Opium Wars, but they were taught it as a series of naval battles, which is not what the Opium Wars really is, and it was really a time period of horrific colonial violence.
With funding from the City of New York and support from CUNY's Asian American Asian Research Institute, 24 high school and college students are paid researchers for the Localized History Project. Their online exhibits include slideshows, zines, archival documents, and artwork that illustrate historical moments across the 5 boroughs.
Understanding the ways in which we can learn from our everyday and see the mundane as like a site of knowledge, I think is very empowering for a lot of students, and like even within their own families, and knowing that they belong to these roots of activism and change.
And maybe just in time, New York will phase out Regents exams by the academic year 2027 to 28. It could mean Sundaram and her student researchers are spearheading the very AAPI history lessons they wanted to teach and learn for the classrooms of the future. For more on the Localized History Project, visit localizedhistoryproject.org. For Asian American Life, I'm Vivian Lee.
Finally, we honor the Filipino Americans who served on the Intrepid and the Growler, the submarine right behind me. They were part of a long legacy of Filipino Americans who served in the U.S. Navy. For many, it was a path to citizenship. To learn more about their stories, you could check out the Intrepid website. And don't forget, you can learn about all our stories. Just follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and on the go on the CUNY TV app. I'm Ernabel DeMillo. We'll see you next time.